What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Jon Root. Welcome to another Sunday Conversation for the Breakaway Podcast. Before I introduce you to this guy right here, I got to tell you about TPUSA Live. If you're not tuning into that Monday through Friday, every single weekday, we got politics and entertainment, a lot of great stuff there, amazing shows from every aspect of culture. You can go to tpusa.com/live to check me out, because if you haven't gotten enough of me here on Breakaway, might as well go to TPUSA Live, right? All right, upon further ado, we got the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs in the house, Harrison Butker, and we're rocking some baseball jerseys. I think as we talk right now, we're stoked that baseball is coming back. Harrison, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here. Grew up a Braves fan, but yeah, definitely happy for the baseball season coming back.
Yeah, huge shout out to Novice, because they put together these custom jerseys here. You got like breakaway on the sleeve. It's got a little old school. I'll try to get behind the basketball here. A little old school pinstripes with the Diamondbacks. It was like the old days. I don't know if you remember Luis Gonzalez when he had that walk-off in the World Series.
No, what year was that?
Man, I think that was 2001.
Okay, I was 6.
Dude, you're making me feel old now, man. I mean, I swear, every single day I roll into this place, TPUSA HQ, I feel older. I tell people, like, the average age around here, I think it's around like 24. I'm 30, so I feel like there's dog years and then there's TPUSA years, so I'm basically like 65 here. But speaking of Novice, they had an amazing Super Bowl party, and that's where we met for the first time. I know a few people in your camp reached out to me and they're like, hey, it would be awesome if you come out to upstate New York. And they threw a great party, and you obviously partnered with them to make some swag like this. They make sure that you got, like, you're a fashion icon, so you got to have some sweet gear. And that was a ton of fun.
Yeah, no, they've been great. They approached me maybe shortly after the Super Bowl in 2019, and we got together and we've been able to come up with some really awesome stuff to throw the Butker logo on. Just their ability to kind of tailor whatever I want is pretty amazing with the material, the fit, all of that stuff. And then to be able to go up to New York to their headquarters and be at that Super Bowl event with a lot of their partners was amazing to see just how much they've grown in those first couple years of doing business, and they're doing great things. Garrett, Nick, and Scotty up there, so super pumped for them. And obviously, when they come out with these kind of special project baseball jerseys, it just kind of shows off their uniqueness and their ability to kind of pull off whatever somebody's looking for.
And I know we talked about this a little bit, offset, and even when we were up there, about it's got to be difficult to watch a Super Bowl after being in the Super Bowl. Like, you want to be there so bad. And are you rooting against kickers at times, or do you want to just see them do well because the pressure is on and everything? What's that feeling like?
I think for the most part, kickers are supporting the other kickers in the league. Yeah. Like, you never want to see another kicker miss. So, was I pulling for the Bengals? Not necessarily. I was definitely rooting for the Rams to be able to pull that one out. And I think it was a great thing for the NFL to kind of show that if you invest in the right players, even for just one season, you can do great things. So I think it was a great thing for the NFL overall. But also, most of the NFL teams only play for 17 weeks, 16 weeks, 16 games, 17 weeks with a bye. Now it's 18 weeks, 17 games. But playing for the Chiefs, all of our seasons are like 21, 22 weeks. So it was definitely odd to have, 2 weeks basically off with the bye week before the Super Bowl and then the Super Bowl. So I definitely enjoyed a little bit more time for the off season, but man, was it tough when you know that you're a part of an organization, you're part of a team that has the abilities to go to the Super Bowl every year and to win it. To miss out on that opportunity definitely hurt. And I think it'll just help us for next season getting back there, and we'll be motivated, more than ever to get back to the Super Bowl and just trying to capitalize on all the talent, all the abilities with Coach Reed, Patrick, and everybody to just take advantage of this time together and keep getting to the Super Bowl.
The question is, would you have stayed out there at halftime and watch that halftime show?
So in the regular season, halftime's like 13 minutes. So we specialists try to run in faster than anybody else so we can use the restroom, get some food real quick, and then we're back on the field trying to get some warm-up kicks during halftime. So for the Super Bowl, the halftime is probably like 20, 25 minutes, it seems like. So you're kind of on that normal cadence. I'm going to go go into the locker room during halftime, bang, bang, get whatever I need to get, and then I'm going out there, and then you realize, oh, wait, it's the Super Bowl. The whole field's taken. They're doing a halftime show. I'm going to watch it, but maybe try to stay away from the cameras a little bit. But, Evan's a great kicker. He probably had the best offseason of any kicker that I've seen. A lot of people talk about Adam Vinatieri, the kick in the snow. But for the short time that I've been kind of watching football and as an NFL kicker, I've never seen something more impressive than what Evan did. And maybe that's just his personality. Yeah. He can get away with chilling on the sideline. And
he was leaning back too. Yeah, he was like, man, I'm not missing this.
He was chilling. You would never catch me doing that. I'd be locked in probably at the kicking net, waiting to go on the field. But, more power to him. But for me, Harrison Butker, I don't know if I'd be doing that.
Has that always been your regimen? You're like, I feel like you are just a straight shooter and you're all buttoned up all the time. Like, man, if you have not gone to this guy's Instagram and checked out how swaggy he is, like you were buttoned up all the time and it seems like you were all business. Like, do you let loose a little bit too? Like, because I know there was times for me, like, I mean, all I did was just punt in Division II, but I had to be a little bit looser. I was still taking it serious, but that's how I was able to stay loose, was kind of joke around a little bit. But it seems like your business. Catch me at the kicking net all day, and that's what I'm worried about.
No, I definitely like having fun, but when it comes to football, I put a lot of stress on myself because I feel like when I do that, I'm prepared for the most stressful moments. So you got some kickers that, they're very loose, they don't really care, and then when the big moment arrives, they can lock in and they can perform well. For me, I just would rather be locked in, the night before the game, the whole game. I love wearing suits. That's kind of been my thing past couple of years, is just being super buttoned up and knowing that this is important and I'm gonna be locked in for as long as I need to be, so that I can go out there when it's a big pressure kick and still perform. I've never been someone that can just turn it on. They can be hanging out on the sideline cracking jokes and then lock in and make a big kick. So I probably overdo it a little bit too much, with how much I just get in the zone. I get very serious, but it matters a lot to me.
Of course.
And I want to do well. I don't want to be the reason why we lost the game. And as a kicker, a lot of times your field goals could be the deciding factor in winning or losing the game. But it's just kind of my personality. I've rolled with it. It's worked, and I don't want to mess around with just letting loose a little bit too much and then potentially it affecting my performance for the worse.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I know we were talking about on the ride over here. You're saying like you've never had In-N-Out burger before, and I know we were chatting about like I feel like they got a set menu and they've had it for 50 years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Same thing with you. It's like you got your routine. This is what I'm going to do, and you've found a lot of success.
Yeah. I love consistency. We talked about kind of that rivalry between In-N-Out and Five Guys. Five Guys got a million decisions. You can get A1 sauce, you can get barbecue sauce, you can get regular onions, grilled onions. List goes on. But I love being consistent. I love my routine. And, if it's not broke, I'm not going to switch it up.
You said there's been times, I know you've talked in some other interviews, that you kind of get angry and you take that anger out on the ball. Like, how do you hone that anger and aggression? I feel like it's almost like a Remember the Titans where, you had Coach Boone telling them just like this, harness that anger and aggression and just take it out, but don't be wild about it. Yeah. And I feel like that's why you've been able to just boot kickoff from 98 yards.
No, that's a good point. I grew up playing soccer. I loved it. I was a center back. I cared more about getting a big slide tackle than I did about scoring a goal. So I definitely liked that aggression aspect. That was how I played the sport. I played basketball, but with basketball, you can't get too physical, or else you're getting 5 fouls.
I always got in trouble with that.
I did love defense.
Always in foul trouble.
I did love defense. But as a kicker, you can't just put in a lot of effort to show people that you're good. Like in basketball, if you're struggling with your shooting, you've got turnovers, at least you got defense and you can put a lot of effort on the court and people can respect that. Or same with soccer, right? You can put in the effort, you're sprinting more to make that important pass, that important play, stopping a goal from happening. But as a kicker, it's just, did it go in or not? So, if I've missed a kick before, or if I've just maybe, been struggling in past weeks and I finally do get a big opportunity, I got to be locked in. I'm trying not to let all these emotions affect me, all the emotions of, people are doubting me, maybe I'm not good enough to do this. The coach is probably thinking about bringing in other kickers or whatever it may be. and you're locked in, you're trying to ignore all those voices that are in your head, but they're still there. And then you go out there and you make the big kick that matters. And then you can finally let all that aggression out of just like, I did it, I'm kind of made for this. And I was able to fight all those demons, or all those voices. And I was able to succeed and do my part and do what I need to do. So that's just kind of how I function. I'm very serious, but there's a lot of emotions going on. I'm just kind of shutting them down or suppressing them a little bit. And then when the kick's over and ideally it goes through, that's when all the emotions come out.
Talk a little bit more about preparation, because you played at Georgia Tech, and you didn't even start playing football until sophomore year?
Sophomore year of high school, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of stories are crazy to me. Like, did that get instilled in you from a family member, or was there just a mentor in kicking that was able to instill, like, here's how you utilize that anger, here's how you prepare for games, here's how you go about this?
Mental side, I didn't get a ton of coaching. From the football side, we were actually blessed enough to have a kicking coach. So most high schools don't have a kicking coach. Most NFL teams don't have a kicking coach. So I went to when I joined the football team and we had a kicking coach, he was able to lay a great foundation for me. I mean, I really appreciate all the stuff that Coach Joe Sterniolo did for me at Westminster to kind of give me that foundation.
And that's out in Atlanta, right?
Yep, okay. Down in Atlanta. But yeah, I mean, if you've grown up kicking a soccer ball your whole life, you kind of have the feeling of what it means to lock out your ankle, lock out your knee, lock out your hip, what it feels like to make contact with a ball. So you can take that over to football, but at the same time, it's a different swing, and you do need some adjustments to help you. And so I had a big leg, and that's what a lot of colleges saw. I went to Georgia Tech as a scholarship kicker, and then I just kept working on the technique aspect of kicking off the ground. In high school, you're kicking off a tee. It's a lot easier. And then when you go off to the ground, that's when it definitely gets more challenging. So I was able to kind of hone in the technique more, and then in the NFL, kept working on it, kept getting better. But the mental side, I think that was just something I was born with, just being competitive and being able to really lock in and just attack the moment and not get nervous or anxious during that moment. I think a lot of times people, they kind of lean into those emotions too much. And I feel like I do a pretty good job of recognizing that the emotions are there. I can't do anything about them. I can just control what I can control. I can focus on my mental cues. I can focus on different technique stuff. But I can't just listen to those emotions and be on the sideline and be in my head. So finally, when I do, make the big kick or have a good game, whatever that looks like, that's when I can let those emotions out finally and kind of recognize them, that this was a really tough position I was in. There was a lot of pressure on me. I mean, if I missed this kick, I potentially could be cut or on a different team. You don't want to think about any of those in the moment, but kind of after it happens, that's when all these emotions hit you, and you're like, man, I was able to defeat all those bad emotions that were kind of coming into my head. And that's the biggest thing as a kicker. How do you mentally handle those tough kicks? Because there's a lot of guys that have the physical potential to be in my position, but for whatever reason, mentally, they weren't able to put it all together. And that's what separates the top NFL guys from, not even, probably getting a scholarship offer in college.
And then you have a different kind of like technique, the way you go about kicking too. I think a lot of people can connect with shooting a free throw. You got your own free throw routine. Not a lot of people have gone out and kicked field goals. Sometimes people are just kind of a little bit more hunched over. They kind of let their arms dangle. But for you, like, you got the best posture I think I've ever seen out there, way better than my posture. And then you always line it up. And when I went to the Super Bowl party, I thought that was fun, like actually getting to see in person. Like, tell me how you go about this. You said you kind of close one eye too, and this is like, where did that come from?
It came from missing a lot of short kicks in college. Yeah, because I missed so many shorter kicks from the hashes. And so in college, one thing that changes from high school is the uprights get a lot more narrow. College uprights and NFL uprights are the same width. But the college hashes are basically almost the same width as the high school hashes. So I think college field goal kicking is actually more difficult than even the NFL. Because in the NFL, the hashes are right down the upright. So for the most part, if you're on the right hash and you kick the ball straight down the hash, it'll hit the upright. So it's like you got to barely aim left and that thing is going to go in. But in college, that's when you're presented with these really extreme angles, especially if it's a short kick. So it was probably like a 31-yard field goal right hash, I think it was, and I just completely missed. But I'm thinking, man, I basically hit the ball exactly where I was aiming, but something was off with kind of aiming there, basically. So now one thing to help with that is I take my 3 steps back and I close my left eye and I just use my right eye to line up and make sure my foot is aiming right down the middle of the upright. So I'll take my right hand and I kind of just draw this imaginary line from my right foot to the spot where the ball is going to be and then the middle of the uprights. And that's really helped me just be assured that my steps are completely calibrated to aim wherever I'm aiming, which majority of the time is down the middle of the uprights. It definitely looks goofy, but if it helps, I'm going to do it. And then for staying upright, I try to feel like I'm a sprinter, and a sprinter, they're in a straight line. Their lower body, upper body is in a complete straight line all the time. So I try not to be too hunched over or have my back hyperextended too much, and just try to keep that straight line. But I also do a weird thing where I point my fingers, which is something I don't even think about. It just happens. But yeah, you see it on film. It looks dorky, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Amen to that. And then also, has anyone ever called you the Kansas City sniper? Because I feel like that's almost which like you got one eye closed and I'm just about to snipe it right through here. This is what I'm aiming for. You almost got the finger guns going too.
Yeah, that's a good name. Maybe I'll have to take that if butt kicker starts losing its fire.
Because you've had the butt kicker name for a long time. Obviously, it just works. You've been a kicker. You probably had that for a long time. And then even Andy Reid brought that up.
Right.
Like that was what, after your first game. Monday night was your first game in the NFL. Kicking,
right. Monday night, first regular season game. A lot of nerves leading up to that game. And again, you watch that kick, a lot of emotions, were happening after that, especially starting the game, missing my very first NFL kick, missed it. Monday Night Football, came back, had some shorter kicks to kind of get in a rhythm, and then had that big kick to win the game for Monday Night Football. But yeah, after the game, Coach Reid said, he called me buttkicker.com. That was my Twitter handle since high school. I think a high school trainer just mentioned it to me, but there's a lot of different play-on names you can come up with the last name, like Butker.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm rolling with butt kicker.
Going back to pressure, though, I think this last season, specifically the divisional round, was the best weekend of football I know I've ever seen. Maybe we will ever see in NFL history. And it felt like everything came down to a last-second field goal. Everything came down to just a last-second play. And there's a ton of pressure, obviously, in the playoffs. And I'm sure that's heightened, too. I'm sure Arrowhead is just going insane. Did this feel like you were the most pressure you've ever been under?
I think so. McCole Hardman was always asking me throughout, the season, like, but would you rather have the game-winning field goal or the field goal to tie the game? Like, what's more pressure? I'm like, oh, definitely the kick to tie the game. He was like, that's what I'm saying. I agree. Because if you got to tie the game, well, if you miss it, the game's over. But if it's just the game-winning kick, and I guess we're supposing that it's a tie game and it's the kick to win the game, the game's over if you make it. If you miss it, you're still going to overtime. You still have that possibility to still win the game. And then you talk about playoffs. Well, if it's a game-tying kick and you miss it, the season's over. So I'm sitting in my hotel room watching all these divisional games. I forget what games I had seen, but I saw Evans kick against the Titans, and there was another big kick. I don't know if Robbie's kick against the Packers was a divisional game.
Yeah, so that was a divisional game.
Yeah, it was another divisional game, but you're just seeing all these kickers making game-winning kicks or kicks to tie the game. But playing for the Chiefs, we really didn't have any game-winning kicks all season or even game-tying kicks. I think against the Giants, Week 8, I had a 34-yarder with like a minute left, and that was, to win the game. But usually we were just blowing teams out, or, unfortunately we would just lost the game and it wasn't close, or at least wasn't a 3-point difference. But yeah, going in the playoffs, you never know what you're going to expect, and every point matters. But just watching those games, seeing those kickers make those kicks, you try, at least I try not to get overhyped about it. I don't want to now think about, oh, this game's going to come down to me. I need to make this kick, potentially to continue our season or to win the game. I try to just go back to what I can control, focus on my technique, treat it like any other game, but kind of in the back of my mind know that, this is a big game and I need to be prepared. So how am I going to prepare? Well, I'm going to sleep better, eat better, my focus is going to be better, all that stuff that is just going to help you be a better kicker, better athlete, whatever you're doing. And then going in that game, sure enough, it was a kick to force the game to overtime. But I guess that's just how playoffs go, and you got to be expecting it. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I could kind of get some redemption in that game from missing. So I missed a 51-yarder left hash, I think, going into halftime. And then the kick to force overtime in that game was like a 49-yarder left hash. So it was almost like I got a completely second try on the same kick. And, glad I went through. James snapped the ball perfect, and Tommy did a great job holding it. And, we were able to make the kick. So, that's kind of what you live for as a kicker. You don't just want to make kicks that don't matter and just kick extra points all day long. You want to get those pressure moments, and hopefully you do well with it.
And it's up to the unit too. Like, you got to make sure you're in tune with your snapper and your holder too. I know it's while you're out here, there's some NFLPA meetings going on. There's a few other kickers around. It's probably fun interacting with them to try to understand like what their unit looks like. And because there's been some units that have been together for a long time. Like, everyone always talks about Justin Tucker. And he's got a lot of the same people for a long time, and that hasn't fluctuated much. So you need to build a bond with those guys, because you can trust yourself to go kick, but you want to make sure your snapper and your holder are in tune with when you want to go, where the hold needs to be, where the snap needs to be, and everything.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people don't quite understand, is how important the chemistry is from the long snapper to the holder and the kicker. And, potentially if you're looking at bringing a different punter in, now every punter in the NFL is also the holder. So you bring in a different punter. Well, now that actually affects the field goal operation. And then obviously if you bring in a new snapper, that's affecting field goal operation as well. But as much as I can get time with other specialists, it's just invaluable to be able to talk with them, because there's one kicker, one punter, one long snapper on the team. So 6-7 months out of the year, I'm just with those guys, but I'm not able to really kind of just branch out and talk and kind of get different ideas from other guys that play my same position. So, I'm fortunate to be out here, and for whatever reason, a lot of specialists are involved with the Players Association.
Maybe they just trust you guys. Maybe they're like, we'll send the kicker. They seem, right. If they can handle pressure kicks and last second kicks, I'm sure they can handle some negotiation out here. So send the kickers.
Right. Yeah. So it's been great to talk with them and just kind of talk about off-season stuff, anything we're changing, anything we're going to be focusing on for next year, potential rule changes, anything we can really get going that's going to help kind of.
Let me stop you there for rule changes then, because you've been out there for some coin tosses in overtime. This is a two-parter right here, Harrison. Number one, do you always go with tails never fails, or do you have a certain way you go about that? And number two, do you want the overtime rules changed to where both teams should have the ball?
So I've actually, in my 5 years, I guess I've been a captain for 3 seasons now. I've never done the coin toss. But growing up, if I could see heads, I would call heads. If I could see tails, I was calling tails. I was just rolling with that. But I'd normally let, Patrick or Tyron or somebody else do it. It's funny though, because you have Tyron Matthew. He's a big leader on our team. And he's like, no, but like you do it. You do the coin toss. You talk. I'm like, no, bro, you got it. I'm not talking it. I'm not embarrassing myself. You know way more about football. If someone's gonna embarrass himself, it's gonna be you, not me.
Because that's the last thing you want too. It's like it's already a ton of pressure. You're out there like kicking field goals probably at the most 4 times in a game. So people like, they're out there. You got to make the field goal. You got to make the PAT. And then if you're out there to call the coin toss, like freaking Butker out here, and why didn't he go tails never fails?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to get blamed for anything else, but it's also hard to like even hear the referee out there. The crowd's going. I'm sure they can hear him over the speaker system, but for whatever reason, it's kind of difficult. So I understand how guys kind of mess up. Saying, what is it like? Do you want to defer? And they're like, no. Well,
I have no idea what you're saying.
I'm not even going to get in that. But yeah, so with the overtime rules, it's hard because, with the Bills, we got the ball, we won the coin toss and we scored. And then the very next game against the Bengals, we won again the coin toss, and then we turned it over and the Bengals were able to go down to score. So it's like, both teams have an opportunity. I don't know. If you definitely want to see both quarterbacks out there, you got to change the rules, so that both guys can get, the ball. But I don't know. I think it would be great if it was just like a kicker duel. I've seen that proposed. It's just
we were talking about that on the podcast, and I know a bunch of people in the office have brought that up. Like for me, I'd geek out on that. I think it's just like you start at the 30 and then keep moving back like 5 yards at a time. Like I think that would be incredible. But a lot of people would be pissed.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a proposal of one team could pick how far the field goal was going to be, and then the other team would pick, did they want to kick it or they wanted the other team to kick it, and then whoever made it, or if you make it, you win. If you miss it, you lose. But I'm for whatever's going to make kickers more valuable. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be a cool thing to watch. But at the end of the day, are fans coming to the game to watch kickers? Probably not. They're probably coming to watch the quarterback. But I think the aspect of a game-winning kick, game-tying kick, I mean, you can't take that out of football. I mean, it's called football for a reason. You got to get the foot in it.
Well, if you change the rules like that would be a little bit more like soccer. Like when people see penalty kicks, right? It would be similar. It's like, and I do agree that would put a lot more emphasis on like your special teams unit, your kicker, everything like that. That means a lot. And there's times too where you see, I mean, the Green Bay Packers struggled this year mightily. And that was probably the reason they lost that game, was because they just had a lot of miscues, whether that was punting or field goal kicking, whatever it may be. I think there needs to be a little bit more emphasis on special teams. And a lot of people just don't understand. That's 1/3 of the game. It's a massive part of football and a big reason why teams go to the Super Bowl or win a Super Bowl or win these big games.
Yeah, special teams make a big difference, and they definitely get highlighted in the playoffs. And it's credit to special teams coach, all the guys that are part of kind of the core of a special teams. I mean, you got to think, like, if you're the 4th or 5th string wide receiver, you're going to be on basically all the special teams plays. Mm-hmm. If you're the 5th, 4th string linebacker, you're going to be on all the special teams plays. So there is definitely a core for every team, maybe of 5 guys that are on every special teams unit that work very closely with the special teams coordinator. And then, of course, you got the snapper, the punter, and then the kicker, who all got to be on the same page. And it's a tough thing. And if 1 point is the difference between winning and losing, then you should definitely invest in 1/3 of the game. It's not 1/3 of the plays, but it's definitely up there, and it's extremely important.
Tell me though, who is your kind of like kicking idol right now? That's in the league currently.
I don't really have an idol anymore, but when I was in high school, so I started kicking, and then in college, I looked up to guys like Graham Gano, who I was fortunate enough to be with the Carolina Panthers, got drafted there in 2017.
Because for people that don't know, you were signed to the practice squad originally. So you were drafted in the 7th round, then you got put on the practice squad, but you got to learn from him. And then that's when the Chiefs, they signed you off the practice squad.
Right, yeah, they signed me week 4. Yeah, I was able to learn a ton from Graham. I loved watching Brandon McManus, the Broncos kicker. He's out here for the PA meetings.
That guy's got such a boot. It's especially doing it at Mile High.
Right. And then Tucker, I think he's been able to revolutionize the position with his ability to be as accurate as he is, breaking the longest field goal of all time. I mean, what he's done in his career is extremely impressive. So those 3 guys are guys that I definitely looked up to, and I still look up to them. I mean, every kicker is just so different. All of our techniques are very different, and I appreciate different things of every kicker in the NFL. And just to be one of 32 in the world doing this is amazing, and all these guys are really impressive. So the more I can learn, the better.
Are you thinking about branding all the time too? Because obviously Pat McAfee is just massive right now. And I remember like Rich Eisen, he had a little bit of that brand, like punters are people too. And I kind of wish this was bigger when I was in college too, because I would have just been like full speed ahead with all that content, or just like all this kicking stuff. And then now with Pat McAfee, he made kickers cool. Oh yeah. And it's not just like some guys that are off to the side. They're kind of, I feel like for so often, I played football since I was 9. You just kind of like looked as kickers were kind of dweeby or something, but you're a beast. Like, look at you, like you're fit, good looking guy, and you got a big brand behind you too. And people love it. People love Pat McAfee. They love following you, and you're a superstar, just like any of these guys that are quarterbacks or wide receivers a little bit too.
I really took a lot of pride in the weight room. I was like, that's where I can get these guys to kind of respect me, because are you going to respect the kickers and punters who, when you're outside in the heat of training camp, they're in the indoor stretching? Like, how are you going to respect those dudes? And you're in the meeting rooms and they're in the players' lounge, like playing ping pong and pool. Like, it's hard to respect them at that time. So I always figured, when we're in the off season, when I'm doing the exact same thing as them, let me try to be first in all the sprints, first in all the lifts. And that's where I can kind of gain that respect. Because then when you get to the season and you see that they're not doing the same workload, you understand that they can't necessarily be doing that. Like, they don't need to be doing the same thing that a linebacker receiver is doing. But then they can think back to all the hard work that the specialist was doing in the off season. So that's kind of how I approached it, gaining respect. Definitely when I was in college, and then NFL as well. I think I really started taking kicking seriously when I got to the league. Obviously, that's your job now. That's how you provide for your family. And I think they noticed the time spent watching film, the time at practice, just taking it seriously, because it'd be really easy to just show up, get your kicks with the team, and then kind of deuce out and not really think anymore about kicking. You just go home. So I've been able to get some more respect doing that. And then, of course, Pat McAfee, to be able to get nominated to the Pro Bowl, not go to it, and then basically just start with Barstool and do great there, and then start your own thing. And just, he's blown up. He's been great for the brand. I love, I guess Rich Eisen and Pat McAfee both are doing, for the brand. Kickers are people too. I mean, Rich has been a great guy. He's always showing love to the kickers and punters, but I think everybody realizes that they do matter, when it comes down to the end of the game. Like, everybody wants to be a kicker throughout the week, but then on Sunday or whenever your game day is, nobody wants to be the kicker in that situation when there's all that pressure on you. But at the end of the day, that's why you're a kicker. You kind of deal with all the comments that guys make, joking with you, but then when you make that big kick, they understand, like, wow, this dude, even though he doesn't go through the same stuff that I do during the week or during training camp, he still has a really difficult job, and he's one of us. But that's the beautiful thing about football. You can have tons of different types of guys, wide variety that all can contribute and help the team win.
You definitely do got a wide variety of guys on the Chiefs. You definitely got obviously got some big time superstars where everyone's following Patrick Mahomes. Like, he just got into the league and just took it by storm. And you got someone like Travis Kelce, could go down as one of the greatest tight ends of all time. Tyreek Hill, that's faster than a cheetah. And you got, Nicole Hardman, that's done a great job. You got obviously a great running back squad there too. It's like everybody. Like, there's a lot of fun guys on these teams. And have you gotten to connect with a lot of them pretty much ever since you jumped on board? Are they pretty much the same as what you'd see online?
Man, it was unreal for me getting to the NFL. So before I get to the Chiefs, just going to the Panthers and seeing Curtis Samuel was a receiver. He got drafted by the Panthers from Ohio State. And then Christian McCaffrey, seeing both those guys in person, how fast they were, just how different it was from college, the speed, the strength, the ability. I'm like, yeah, I could never do what those dudes are doing. And then again with the Panthers, seeing Julius Peppers in person,
man,
like, that dude is a beast. So that was a huge eye opener. And then I go to the Chiefs and you see Cheetah run, Tyreek Hill. I've never seen a faster dude. The way he can stop and accelerate is unreal. I mean, you just start taking that for granted. Like, I played 5 seasons now, and I'm seeing this guy practice week after week after week, and he's he's the fastest football player, I think, in the league right now. So you got Tyreek Hill, you got Travis Kelce, which is revolutionizing tight end, the way he's able to move. He's like a receiver, but he's massive. He's amazing to watch. Patrick looks like he's just playing in his backyard, just doing whatever he wants, just slinging the ball, sidearms,
no looks, everything.
Got a cannon. He's super competitive, but he's also just very down to earth, like kind of playful, like a kid. And I think that's why he's able to excel and just be himself when he's out there in the biggest moments. It's just, Coach Reed always talks about letting your personality show. And I think that just empowers guys like Patrick, Tyreek, Kelce. You got Tyrann Mathieu, who's an amazing leader. It's been awesome to see what he's been able to do for our defense. You got Chris Jones on the D line and, just an absolute beast. And we got a a basketball hoop in our locker room, so you're able to see all these guys up close, like that were beasts at playing basketball in their high school days. And I don't know, maybe guys like Kelsey and Chris could at least hold their own a little bit, maybe at an NBA practice or something like that. But these guys are just freak athletes, and it's just, I'm very fortunate to be up close and see these specimens in person, and it's a great joy. I think you also forget that they're just normal guys, right? Yeah. Like you see them on TV doing the interviews, doing the different media brand stuff, but at the end of the day, they just want to have fun. They probably got families, kids, and they're just taking it one day at a time and enjoying the NFL and everything that brings.
What position will you be playing on the basketball court then? And then, like, I put together the Kansas City Chiefs starting five on a basketball court. You're obviously involved in that starting five. What position are you playing?
I don't know if I'd be involved in that, but I like to think of myself as like a JJ Redick, just pull-up shooter. I'm not really going to dribble a lot, but I think Tyreek Hill would be a great point guard. He's a great shooter. Patrick would definitely be there. I'm taking myself off. Our biggest guy is probably Chris Jones, but when you think about NBA size,
just throw it down low.
Yeah, he's not a 7-footer. Chris is probably 6'6", so we'd have a really small center. But yeah, we'd have a decent squad. I mean, those guys can do probably whatever they want to in whatever sport it is.
Mm-hmm. And then to switching gears a little bit, obviously it was really difficult in the COVID season. There was nobody in the stands, and I know it's something you've talked about too. It's like you're used to kicking in practice with nobody around, so it's really not too much different to you. But you talk about how football brings people together and sports bring people together unlike anything else. And I think there's nothing like a football locker room. So like during that entire time, was that pretty like difficult discussions with a lot of these teammates that you had, or maybe executives? And, obviously everyone's trying to figure out what's going on here, and then you're figuring out protocols and you're going through all that. Like, what was that experience like specifically for you?
It was super tough. I'm still amazed when I think back to all the stuff that we had to get through. Obviously, the restrictions were more for the 2020 season than 2021. At least for 2021, we had fans there, but we still had different things like, you had to wear masks on the sideline, or you couldn't sit next to each other in the cafeteria. And so for some of our meetings, you had to be separated. So there's all types of things that we still had for 2021. But in 2020, that's when it was, everybody's masked up, separated, practice got moved up. We had online meetings. It really took away that locker room feel, where you could kind of really get to know guys off the field. And then when you talk about the game, not having any fans there, I think I struggled just because it felt like a scrimmage. It didn't feel like this was actually an NFL game. And, I think maybe when the pressure wasn't there, I wasn't able to kind of do my thing and succeed as much as I had in the past. But, just working through that mentally, putting the pressure on myself, I was able to kind of get through that as the season went on. But it was super tough. I'm glad we got through it, because at the end of the day, an NFL locker room is so special because we don't really get involved in a lot of the political things that are going on in the world. It's like, you're my brother, we're trying to win. We're going to be in the trenches together, maybe not with Harrison in the off season, we'll be in the trenches in the weight room. But we'll be together and we're just battling out. I mean, you're in a locker room with, probably 70, 80 guys, including practice squad and the injured guys from different backgrounds, different upbringings. People look different, people think different, and we're all together. We're all playing together towards the same goal, and it's a really special environment. I think that's what a lot of people miss when they leave sports or leave playing football, is not having that camaraderie with just so many different dudes. It's a special thing, but I'm glad we're past COVID, and I think one thing we've learned is that we can't just get by with all the virtual stuff. We got to have in-person interaction. That's so important for everybody to have that face-to-face, where I can see your whole face, and see your expressions.
Because I think we were talking before this, like, when's the last time you did an in-person interview?
I know, yeah. I was thinking, I mean, so much stuff has been virtual. I mean, this off season's been great because you can finally travel around and stuff without having to get tested every day. But yeah, it's been great. I'm just glad we're moving forward, getting past it.
Do you feel like it, at least the atmosphere in Kansas City, provided opportunities to speak freely about this stuff, at least with your teammates? Obviously, no one wants to go out there, and I think we talk about it all the time here at like Turning Point USA. you can't just go out guns blazing talking about like your beliefs and expect people to just be okay with it, especially the world we live in. Like you got to understand there's going to be a little bit of backlash. But do you feel like at very least the Kansas City Chiefs like provided an atmosphere for players and coaches and players and executives to at least talk about like, okay, these protocols, I'm trying to understand like how this is changing from last season. I'm just trying to understand, like, obviously I want everybody to be safe, but like, how are we going about this? Why are these decisions being made now compared to last season? Did it at least provide that opportunity to speak up?
Yeah, I thought, with Coach Reed and with our head athletic trainer, Rick Burkholder, they did a great job kind of allowing us to have our own opinions. I mean, just kind of hearing stories from around the league with different athletic trainers, different coaches, and how they approach the whole situation, basically saying you have to do X, Y, and Z or else basically you're out of here. That's a shame, and I don't think we should, be in a country where, we're having to decide, do I have to take this thing? Do I have to put this thing on my face just to get by and kind of live like a normal person? So back to the Chiefs, they were very open in their discussions about it. I mean, I had a lot of issues with all the protocols that we had to go through. Rick, our head athletic trainer, did a great job kind of communicating to me why we're doing all these things, enough so that I was able to go through my day-to-day with understanding where the PA is coming from and kind of understanding different guys on the team and what their viewpoints are. Because a lot of times, if you're on Twitter, you kind of are in a vacuum. You don't necessarily are listening to people that have different viewpoints from you. And if you do hear from people that have different viewpoints, they're probably trolling you or doing something that, is just irritating.
Yeah, because everybody's just they're so quick to be negative, especially with a place like Twitter, where it's like you don't really see a lot of optimism there. You don't see a lot of positivity there. So if there's something, especially in the culture that we're in right now, you throw out something, and there's only 240 characters. Mm-hmm. So are you really going to be able to explain yourself in a tweet? And people are going to take that and run with it. And I'm sure, especially now, they're just like wolves, waiting for somebody to say something that they disagreed with, or that they could turn into something where they even try to cancel people. Obviously, like the Aaron Rodgers situation. No matter what you think about that, there's a lot of people that were just waiting for something to be said that they could twist into something else and then villainize somebody.
Yeah. I mean, during COVID, when this was going on the last 2 years, everybody's basically interacting online or over Zoom, and nothing's face to face. So it was kind of nice for us, at least as NFL players, to still be in person together, and we could have these conversations. Guys on both ends of the spectrum, kind of at least understanding where each other's coming from, and I think that moved the conversation forward. And it was good for me. I thought guys on the team, coaches and stuff, they understood where I was coming from, and then it was nice to hear different people that had issues. There was some coaches that had immune compromised children, which is why they were trying to be super safe around the facilities, and that's something I can respect. But if I wasn't able to have that conversation with them, I wouldn't have known that, and maybe I would be the one that's being the troll. Mm-hmm. So it was a good learning experience for everybody involved, and I thought the Chiefs did a great job.
Yeah, and I think you can always respect that. It's just we want to have discussions about these things and not just say, hey, this is the way it is, just take it and run with it. This is what you have to do. And it sounds like you just the way you live your life too is just I want to be free.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to decide for myself, but also knowing too, it's you don't say these things to try to hurt somebody else. And I think that's where too much of it got into, especially people watching sports. They're these are some of the healthiest people on planet Earth. But also at the same time, it's I just want to understand these protocols. I want to understand what's going on in somebody else's life. And I just feel like often now people just aren't even talking. It's just, I think both sides of the aisle do a really bad job of that, where it's you might see somebody with a mask on. It's just I can't believe that person would just do that. Do you even know the background? It's sure, we can know the science behind stuff, but what's that person's story? And I think once we get that and sit down together and ask those questions, I think that's when we can come together as a nation and as humanity, basically.
Right. And that's one of the things with a locker room. You're in a locker room with people with tons of different viewpoints, and you're able to understand them. And I think the only tough thing was for a lot of players, they felt like they didn't have a choice. It was almost like you have to do these things. You got to follow these protocols, or else you're not going to have a job and you're going to get cut. But, for me, I just felt in my situation, I talked to my wife and I was fully okay with stepping away from football. It was like, I'm going to stick to my principles.
Wow.
I'm not going to compromise. And if this is my last season, then so be it. And I think in some ways I was an example for a lot of the guys, like, wow, maybe I should have stood up a little bit more. Maybe in the future when there's something that's going to come down where I feel like my freedom's getting taken away and I feel like I don't have a voice, well, I can stick up and stand up for what I believe in, because at the end of the day, football isn't my life. It's my job. I love it. I love kicking. I love the Chiefs. I love playing, but I'm a child of God and I'm a husband and father, and that comes before playing football. So if I'm ever doing something that I think goes against those first two things, as being a child of God and as being a husband and father, then I'm prepared to step away and look for another means to provide for the family. So I think a lot of the younger guys, especially who maybe identify as just football as my life, that is who I am, they were the ones that maybe had to compromise on their beliefs just so they could continue doing what they love. And it's a tough thing. I don't know what I would have done if I was in their position as a young Ricky, but being more established in the NFL, I thought I was, I'd kind of seen what the NFL was about. I've been blessed to play 5 seasons, and I know that I'm more than just a football player, and that really helped me kind of stay strong during this whole thing.
So you were ready to leave football. If it came down to it, you said, this is basically like the hill that I'm going to die on. Was that something you expressed to higher-ups at the Kansas City Chiefs, something you talked about with your teammates, or is that something you kind of just kept in with your family? Like, if it gets to this point, this is what I'm going to stay strong on. This is where I'm going to hold the line.
For the most part, I kept it with my family, but I think everyone kind of understood that because, there were a lot of things that I had to do because of my decisions that other people did not have to do. And I got a lot of questions, comments like, man, why are you doing all this? Like, you gotta test every day. You gotta wear the mask all the time, do all these things. And for me,
so that was different than other position groups or just other players. Like, so it seemed like there's, from what you're saying and from what even Cole Beasley was saying, like, hey, I'm not like pro or anti-vax. I'm pro freedom, pro choice in this situation. He's another guy that says, hey, I'm lucky enough to be a veteran in the NFL to where I can make a decision that someone that's a rookie or trying to get a position on this team can't make. So there's basically a hierarchy of protocols and who had to do them, who didn't have to do them, right?
Right. I mean, everybody saw the memo that came out. If you got vaccinated, these were the freedoms that you were granted. If you didn't get vaccinated, these were all the things that, got taken away from you. And I just decided I'm willing to accept all of whatever comes, all of the sacrifices, and I'll deal with all the repercussions, because I'm ready to move away from the game if I need to, if it ever came down to you have to do this to be able to play, which for coaches, it basically came down to that. There were a couple coaches that stopped, that weren't able to coach anymore because they didn't get the vaccine. But I felt like if I do have a right as a player to stand up and say I'm not going to get the vaccine, I might as well exercise that right. And I had a lot of coaches that were like, man, I respect what you're doing. Like, we didn't really have a choice, but at least you had a choice and you exercised it no matter the repercussions and the sacrifices that you had to go through. So, I respect guys that speak up like Cole Beasley, and just speak up about, having a choice. And it's not about being anti-vax. It's just, I don't feel comfortable doing something, so I'm not going to do it. Right.
Yeah,
and having the freedom to do that.
Especially how hard you guys work to just keep your body in tune. And I think that's where a lot of people were at, where it's like, I'm a professional athlete, and like being an NFL player, it takes a lot to get here. And that if there's any sort of chance where that can hurt me, I want to understand, why scientifically this is best for my body, because I eat right, I work out right, I sleep right. This is the way I'm going to be regimented. That's the way you live your life. So it's like, I just want to understand why this is best for me. And then not just for you, but for, other people. That's where a lot of people got into the weeds of all this, where it's like, okay, well, if you don't want to do it, that's hurting somebody else. And I think that's where, the NFL came out and said, we're not going to test asymptomatic people. And we're going to change the rules a little bit around the playoffs. And I'm sure there was a little bit of just like confusion there, where it's like, is the science changing? Is there more data coming out? And I think a lot of it too, people just need to understand who you are as a person and why you're making this decision. It isn't some political stance.
Right.
This is just like an American freedom that you feel like people should have.
And it didn't come from a place of thinking I was, above hurting anybody or putting people in harm's way. I mean, if you weren't vaccinated, you had to wear a mask all the time. You had to test every day. There was all these things that you went through to make sure that if there were players there that were uncomfortable being around anybody that was unvaccinated, that, the unvaccinated person was going through all these protocols to keep everybody safe, because I would never want to, hurt any of my teammates or do any of those things. And I think a lot of people respected that. But again, glad we're past that and moving forward.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's where, that's in general where it's like, as a team, you guys are only as strong as your weakest link. You talk about the importance of the locker room and how important it is. Doesn't matter what position you're playing, what coach you are, you guys want to be a strong unit. And I think in general, like, sports is such a great view of that, of like how I think America should look like, almost a locker room in a lot of ways, where you have so many different people that are able to come together for one goal. You're there to win a championship. And obviously there's some personal stuff that comes into that, and there's people that have to leave for, mental health reasons, or there's a death in the family, or there's an injury here or there, but there's a bond. And I feel like that's where I think a lot of Americans should be looking to sports, and sports should be a great example of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example for how do you get along with people with differing viewpoints, and the more we can kind of stay away from those Twitter world wars that are going on, because if you just look at that, you're like, man, the world's a very ugly place. But people are, I think, for the most part, coming from a place of love and sincerity, and it's just getting to know their viewpoints and talking to them, and then figuring out who they really are. It's so important.
And then who you are, because you know who you are in Christ. You're just talking about that there, where it's like, anything compromises my faith, I'm a child of God. If anything is going to try to eliminate that or compromise me to compromise that ain't going to happen, because that's who you are, and that's the way you drive your life, is by how can I be as Christ-like as humanly possible. And then you talk about love. I feel like that is the perfect example of love, and I feel like that's how you explain that to people. That's how you use your platform to speak to that a little bit about finding your faith and being a devout Catholic.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ is our number one role model, right? So any situation we find ourselves in, there's that famous bracelet. What would Jesus do? For me, I stopped going to church when I was in college. It's kind of when you're getting to know who you are, and I was able to, through great friendship I had with a walk-on punter on the team, I was able to get back into church, going to mass, receiving the sacraments, and I was able to kind of really change my life around. And that was a great moment for me, because it was the first time that I embraced the faith on my own. In the past, it was my parents, pushing it on me, which is a great thing. I think parents should do that. But in every young person's life, they have to make that decision of, am I a Christian or am I an atheist? Am I going to follow the commandments? Am I going to follow Jesus as my role model or not? We all have the decision, and that's a daily decision that we have to make. But as soon as I started really owning that path of the straight and narrow, it was able to put a lot of things in perspective of me. The worldly accomplishments was no longer my number one drive, right? Like it was how can I be as holy as I possibly can be? How can I be as virtuous I can to be like all these great saints, to be like Jesus? And that's really what has fueled me, and it's a daily challenge that we all embark on. But I'm more proud of the fact that I'm a husband and a father, and I love being with my family, and I love just seeing them grow up, see the love between my wife and I grow, and continue to nourish that. I mean, that's what really drives me. And then as my job, as something that I also love, but not quite as much as the other more important things, that's something that I love going to work every day, taking care of my body, the body that God's given me. Kicking is...
It's a temple.
Yes,
that's what I heard.
It's a temple. Yes, just diving into kicking and figuring out how can I get better at this kind of simple thing that everybody thinks they can do, but how can I, get a little bit better in it. But yeah, I mean, my core, my foundation is in Christ, and that's what then allows me to go out into the world and evangelize and be in the world, and to bring the good news everywhere I go.
And then that's obviously just wildly countercultural. So like people listening to this podcast or watching this podcast right now, and they hear someone like you, someone that's made millions of dollars in the NFL, someone that's only been in the NFL for 5 years, and you have a chance to do some incredible things. And for you to say, my identity is not in being a football player, and I'm willing to make sacrifices, even step away from football. People right now, they're just like, Harrison, you're crazy. But for people like us, we understand, like, for me, I got this ripped away from me if I'm not a podcast host anymore, hosting TVUSA Live in front of a camera. Like, if I lost my voice the next day, it's just like, that's not who I am. I'm not going to go up to heaven and say, like, hopefully you saw a lot of good content from me, Lord. It's like, no, I want you to know that, like, I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant.
I think it's about using our talents, right? So God's given everybody different talents. We're called to magnanimity, like the virtue of being great in great things. So you've been called to do, your talents definitely in all in the media side and commentating, doing these podcasts and these videos. That's what you're excelling at, and God wants you to be the very best at that. Mm-hmm. I've kind of found this ability to kick balls really far, and I'm trying to be the best at that.
Really far and accurately.
Yes. Yeah. But at the end of the day, God could take both of these things, away from us, and we have to be okay with that. I always say, I don't pray to make the kick, right? I pray for God's will to be done, because if it's God's will for me to miss this kick and it's my will to make it, well, I want to miss the kick. I'd much rather go down God's path for my life than kind of going down my own, because we all know how that's going to lead. So yeah,
Have you ever had like some like pretty, like, what's the biggest prayer you ever had before a kick? Because I feel like that's always like when we get into this pleading with God at times, we're just like, all right, God, if you let me make this kick, like, I promise, like, I'm not going to do this or that or the other thing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, as a Catholic, I'm just on the sideline praying the rosary, and I just pray for this ability to be calm, to recognize that it's a blessing to even be here, to be in front of all these people, to kind of put God's talents on display, because God gave me these talents that I'm able to show people and bring a lot of happiness and entertainment to people all across the world. So that's a blessing in itself. And then I just pray that I can glorify Him in everything I do. So even if I miss this kick, how can I glorify Him? If I make it, how can I glorify Him? And like I said earlier, if it's His will for me to miss, I need to be okay with that, because I'd rather follow His will than follow mine. And especially with kicking, so much of it is kind of, it's not luck, but you never know. The wind might do something. It might be a bad snap. You might get an injury here or there. I really feel like God's just been guiding me through this journey, and I'm just trying to stay faithful, trying to stay present, put in my best effort, but be okay with whatever whatever He leads me into.
And sometimes the true testament of man is how he responds to failure. And I feel like right now, too, it's funny. We always have this on the podcast. We have this participant ribbon. Nice. And I feel like that's kind of like the society we live in right now, where it's just like, all right, well, you were a part of it, so here you go. Win or lose, there's a nice little trophy for you, or a ribbon. Right. But there's times with you, it's like you miss a kick, and you got to be able to go right back out there, and that next kick might be the game winner. Yeah,
you got to be able to move on. And I think a lot of times failure can fuel us, whether, say you fail and then you get moved into a completely different sector, a completely different job, that might be a better opening than you had before. That might be where God wants you. So, I think failures are a good thing in life. They push us, and we should accept those and accept whatever it is that wherever God might lead us, because we might go from some glamorous life to then doing something that's not so glamorous, making less money. You got all these hardships, but you look at God's only Son. He went through way more hardships than you probably are ever going to go through, and that's God's Son that went through all those things. So if our role model was able to suffer this much, I think we should be able to accept that suffering and know that we can offer it up. And at the end of the day, we want to be in heaven with our Lord for all eternity, and for him to say, job well done, good and faithful servant.
Have you had some pretty good conversations with people in the Kansas City Chiefs organization, whether that be teammates or anybody else in the organization, about faith? Because you're pretty open about it. You let people know for sure that is my identity. I love the Lord, and you're always giving glory to him. Has it led to some pretty good conversations?
They definitely understand that I'm locked in, in everything I'm doing. So when I'm
locked in on the Lord and locked in on kicks.
Yeah. When I'm at the facilities, I'm locked in on everything I need to do there. And it was definitely tough with COVID basically these past 2 seasons, because the human interaction was kind of taken away with not as much time in the locker room, meeting rooms spread out, virtual stuff, cafeteria, not being able to eat there. But people know I'm definitely open about my faith, and they definitely talk to me about it when it comes up. But I try to stay open about it and talk about it. I don't try to force it on people. A lot of times it'll just naturally happen. And also I think just the example of how you live your life is also a big testament as well. But for God to have completely changed my life, to have had this big of a role in my life, and then to kind of hide that and not bring that to life, I think is a disservice for all the great things that he's given me.
And then I got a little funny response here. I hope your manager doesn't hate me for this. But when we went out to upstate New York, and you guys invited me to go to Mass. It was the second time I've ever been to a Mass. And for me, in Protestant, I don't go to a Mass at all. And show up, and it's a Latin Mass. And I know there's times where we oftentimes might take ourselves like too serious as Christians or Catholics. Or whatever religion you subscribe to, that there's times where you can go, and I was like, the church was just absolutely incredible, and I love going to a Catholic church, but I remember thinking, I have no idea what is going on here, because the only other Mass I'd been to was just a regular Mass where they were speaking English. It wasn't a Latin Mass. And I remember, because I was meeting you for the first time, and I'm like, all right, I'm pretty sure Harrison's got like a sense of humor, so I'm gonna like toss a few things out here. And I'm like, I'll be honest, guys, no idea what was going on here. That was so funny to me, but it was one of those where, are you going to Latin Mass like all the time? Like, how do you explain that to people if you brought a teammate? Like, hey, this is what you're about to get into here. You might not understand what's being said, but here's how I connect.
I think Mass is already kind of countercultural, and then when you add in the fact of a Latin Mass, where they're not speaking English and everyone's dressed a little bit differently, it's extremely countercultural. And
it took me way too long to figure out that they were speaking Latin. I'll be completely honest. Like, all right, I haven't understood the first 2 sentences.
Yeah. Well, so ever since the 60s, basically, Mass got transitioned from Latin to English, and some other things changed. So that's what I grew up with. And then when I was in college, that's when I got first exposed to this traditional Latin Mass. It's just this old school pre-1960s kind of version of the Mass. And it definitely surprised me. I didn't even recognize it as a Mass because it just looked completely different. But then from leaving college and then traveling, I was in Carolina with the Panthers, and then Kansas City. I went to another Latin Mass where they didn't have any servers there, and I was like, man, I have an engineering background. I can probably just like learn this pretty well and then teach some of the younger boys. But I ended up falling in love with it, and then just started kind of understanding all of the reasons why it got changed and probably why it shouldn't have gotten changed. And I love going to the traditional Latin Mass. That's where I go with my wife and the kids. But it's definitely different. But I think there is this beauty of going to it's not a service, it is the sacrifice of the Mass, but you're going to this event that people in the 400s, 500s were experiencing. And like, it really connects you to all these great saints that through the history of the time after Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection, they all attended this same Mass. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be connected to all those same prayers. But yeah, for me and my family, we're going to the traditional Latin Mass.
Yeah, that was seriously, that was so funny to me. And I know I was like, all right, I have to throw out a few jokes here.
Yeah, I'm sure it was just a complete shock being around that.
No, but it is like I like the traditional aspects of that, because I think right now, like, we live in a world where everything's just so fast paced, where people even think about going to church and sitting down for like an hour plus. They think that is the craziest thing. There's times where I know people are checking out social media and they're like, all right, reels are big on IG. 1 minute, I don't know if I got that time. Where it's like they got the short attention span, but there's times where we need to get away and connect with Christ. And I feel like with a mass too, I feel like going to a few of those now where it's just like you like really get away, like really find time to like really spend quality time with God.
I think that's one of the beautiful things. Also, one of the tougher things to go to traditional Latin mass where they're speaking Latin. There's a lot of singing involved, a lot of just you're sitting and you're basically pushed to just enter into like meditative prayer. It's very tough because people don't have the time span to just sit there for an hour and a half, 2 hours basically, and just be silent and be in contemplative prayer. But I think it's something that we need, something we don't have enough time for, unfortunately. And, as much as I struggle sometimes with that 1.5, 2 hours of silence, I'm reminded to the agony in the garden and how Christ was praying right before his passion, and the apostles couldn't even stay up and pray with him. So it's something that humans have always struggled with, but it's something that is good for us and what we need. I mean, all throughout the Gospels, you hear about Jesus praying all night, just going by himself and praying. And so if it's good enough for our Lord, then it's good enough for us, and we definitely should probably be doing more of it.
Yeah, and I feel like that shows our humanness too. Where we see someone where the disciples there, it's like, what do you mean you're falling asleep? Like, you literally just had God in the flesh tell you that, this is going to be the end, and I need you guys here to protect me. But like, we fail. There's times where like our bodies can only do so much. But I think having that understanding of like who you're doing this for and who you are, a lot of people need to get that now, because I think especially now, not to go down this rabbit trail, but especially during COVID, when the pandemic hit and it was like more than a year in, and there's like churches still closed down, and like people need community. They need to be in person. You're in person now at the NFLPA meeting out here in Phoenix, where it's like you just feel more connected. And especially when you're in a community group that's Christ-centered, if you're not going to have that, people are going to find community somewhere else, and they're going to find something that's of the world and something that is basically built on sand. And I think that's what a lot of people ended up doing. Yeah,
no, that's a great point. We need a strong foundation, and people are going to be searching for answers wherever. And I don't think those answers are found in whatever's going on in the culture. I think those answers are found on Jesus. And the more we can stay rooted in that with being in church, I think the better off we're going to be, and understanding that spiritual nourishment sometimes is better for us than whatever the world has to offer for their nourishment.
And a few more questions before we let you go, because I know we're a little crunched on time here, but you talked about your relationship with your wife and you as a father. And I think especially now in society, we need strong men, and we need people that really emphasize the occupation of being a father and being a husband. I think sometimes people see that as a chore and as something that's maybe a little bit more transactional. That's something like, if it's not really fitting me, I can go and just get divorced, or I can just leave the family here, or, the kids will figure it out. Like, we need strong men to stand up. And is that something that was instilled in you by your father? Obviously, it's something instilled in you through your faith and through scripture. Like, can you tell, like, could you use your platform for that too? I know you had like a little post about you gave out a Super Bowl ticket, right?
Yeah.
It was just like fathers are so important. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So for the Super Bowl ticket, I was looking to kind of highlight fathers that were going through different struggles, hard times, and how could they kind of be highlighted and appreciated for all of their efforts. And, even if you don't make it to the Super Bowl, everybody's granted 2 tickets. So I was able to, kind of come up with this idea to give back to fathers that are really putting in the time to be there for their families as a husband and a father. So, that was a blessing for me, even to highlight this wonderful gentleman who he grew up a Rams fan when they were in California. I don't know when that was, maybe the 80s or something.
Yeah, I think 70s, 80s.
70s, 80s. And then he had never been to a football game, though. And obviously the Rams went to St. Louis and they came back to L.A. And he was able to go to his first Rams football game. And that was in the Super Bowl. And, awesome that they won it. But he just sounded like an amazing husband and father for his family. So I definitely wanted to highlight that. I think it's just so important for our society for men to be men, and so much of what I've seen in my short time kind of as being a man post-college has been just tearing down masculinity, tearing down fatherhood. I grew up with great parents, still together. Both sets of grandparents are still together. So I grew up with this understanding that marriage is kind of for life. We don't always see that for whatever reasons, but when I got married, I knew, okay, this is a time for me and my wife to love each other, number one, unconditionally, to get each other to heaven, and to have a family and see them flourish and to see them grow and get them to heaven as well. And this marriage is not a contract. Like, this is a thing for life. It's a beautiful.
It's a covenant.
Yeah, it's a beautiful covenant. And I feel like that's kind of where my passion has been these last couple of years, definitely since getting married, of highlighting fatherhood and how important that is for our society, for men to be able to develop, virtuous sons and daughters. And that, I think, can really change the culture. It's just starting with the family and starting with the leader of the family, which it's kind of controversial to say, but it starts with the head of the household, which is the father and the husband of the family. So that's kind of what where my passion has been. And like we've talked about, we're humans, we're sinners, we don't want to pray, we don't want to do this and that, but God's calling us to more, and He's calling us to go outside of our comfort zone, to be the leader of our household and do the best we can.
And then being a leader, too, is not being a dictator. I think often people on the other side, maybe a little bit more worldly side, that might not have a religious background, they might say, leader, what? You just tell your wife what to do? You just tell your kids what to do? Women can do things too. It's like, no, like, from our faith background, it's like we are servant leaders. We are there to make our wives better, our kids better, society better, our community better. I think often people, like, at least if you sit down and have conversations, it's like, this is what we mean when we say leader.
Yeah. Jesus Christ, God and true man, complete servant, to all of the apostles, all of His disciples, sacrificed His whole life. And that's the perfect model for us as men, definitely, and for women as well. But as men, if we're going to be leaders, we have to start with being servants. I mean, Jesus was there washing the feet of the 12 apostles. So, we're called to be servants. That's how we should be leaders of our household, is by sacrificing everything for those that we love the most, which is our wife and our kids and anybody else, that might extend to your parents, your grandparents as they get into old age. But it comes from a place of complete sacrifice. And, I'm glad you brought that up. We don't want to be dictators at all. Yeah. It comes from a place of love, not from a place of, I want to be comfortable and everyone else in my life is just going to do whatever I need them to do to make my life more comfortable. No, we're called to be extremely uncomfortable and be servants for all those around us.
And I feel like that's been the theme of so many Sunday conversations. Like, be comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, especially too when we have faith conversations where it's like, once again, this is countercultural. If you want to be comfortable, you can be worldly comfortable, and that might be nice for a little while. But ultimately, is that going to be something eternal? No. Not at all. It almost feels better to be countercultural. It's like, here's what real love is. Here's what real morality is. Here's what real servanthood is. And I think hopefully that gets instilled in our society a little bit more. And I think because of people like you're using your platform for that. And then I'm sure you're in the line of thinking where it's like, I want to make a huge difference in my family. And then if I just have just one teammate that sits down with me and has a conversation, let God do His work, you had a successful career.
Yeah. No, I mean, God's going to allow those conversations to happen, and we just got to be ready to kind of give a testimony and explain where we're coming from. And like you said, let God do all the work and just keep glorifying Him in all that we do.
And then finally, I got one more question. Before I give you that, I do want to say thanks for taking the time for this, because I know it's amazing to have an NFL player sitting in studio here, and especially someone that uses their platform like you do. And I feel like it's fun. We got a nice little fraternity of kickers here with Breakaway. I know we've had David Akers on the show. We've had Steve Weatherford on the show, and it's definitely been a lot of fun. And I think someone like you, I think you have the ability to do something incredible in your career for Christ. And I think hopefully people continue to see that in you, because there's going to be more big games. Kansas City Chiefs are not out of it. Obviously, weren't able to get past those darn Bengals this year, but I mean, you guys are on the move, and I think someone like you, they got to be lucky to have you as the place kicker and just booting those touchbacks and everything that you do for that team. Final question: To the Heights. That is your slogan. That's basically your brand. Explain that a little bit more, and how you came to decide that's the platform I want to push out there.
Yeah, I mean, to the Heights is something, that a great, well, he's not a saint, but he's a blessed, but he was a young guy. He was in the mountains in Italy, and he was very popular, had a lot of friends, but at the same time, he was doing a lot of stuff for the poor that no one really ever knew about. So he's a saint, very virtuous, sacrificing, kind of being very countercultural, using his talents for good. But there was a photo of him climbing a mountain, and he signed it To the Heights, and he died shortly after. So I kind of took that on for a lot of different meanings. But, number one, To the Heights, not number one, but the first thing that most people probably think of is kicking a ball pretty high, like to the heights. That's number one. I think number two is being the best in your field, wherever that is that God's called you. How can you excel and use his talents for good, and how can you glorify him? And then number three is kind of, claiming your crown and getting to heaven. And that's really why we're here. We're here to grow in our relationship with God, to spread the good news, spread the faith, and then ideally be in heaven for eternity with God and all the saints. So that's kind of where I got To the Heights from, and I've really embraced that, and that helps keep me grounded as well, and understand that yes, we are called to to grow in our relationship with the Lord and be in heaven, but he also wants us to excel and do well with wherever he's placed us in this world. So yeah, definitely I kind of end everything I say with To the Heights.
I love that. Do you have a specific slogan you do too? Because I know Steph Curry always just does that, like To the Heights. Do you have like a signal? Like, what do you do?
I always point up after I make a kick, and I kind of got that from Dustin Colquitt, who was the punter for the Chiefs when I was there. But you look at so many kickers now, they're pointing up, and I just think they're thanking God, or whoever they're pointing to. I point up to thank God for all the blessings he's given me, and just it's a blessing to be out there in the first place. But I know that he cares about what I'm doing, because he knows how much I put into it. But he's also, I should also be okay with him making that ball not go to the uprights for whatever reason. But I'm just thanking him just to be alive and just have another opportunity to glorify him.
Bonus question: At the end of your career, are you going to hold the record for longest field goal in the NFL?
I'm going with myself, yes. I got to beat Tucker, beat the 66-yarder.
Let's go. You heard it from the man. Hey, this has been an amazing conversation. We appreciate everybody listening and watching. If you're not subscribed to the Breakaway podcast, make sure you do that. We're on Apple and Spotify. You always can watch us on YouTube and Rumble. If you're not following us on Instagram as well, at TPUSA Breakaway. Ladies and gentlemen, To the Heights. That's been Harrison Butker.
Thank you.
Boom, baby. See ya.